We begin the day with a military buildup that has an entire region on edge. On Tuesday, U.S. President Trump confirmed the U.S. military had carried out a lethal strike on a drug vessel in Venezuela. Trump reportedly wants to use the military to crush the cartels that he says are flooding U.S. communities with fentanyl and other illicit drugs. In the past few weeks, the U.S. Navy has moved warships into the South Caribbean, many off the coast of Venezuela. Now, these images show the cruiser USS Lake Erie crossing the Panama Canal, moving from the Pacific into the Caribbean. And this is the USS Sampson, docked at the entrance, waiting to cross. 7 warships and a nuclear-powered submarine are in the Caribbean or expected to arrive there soon. Now, here is what President Trump said about that military strike earlier this evening.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela, so we took it out.
Well, the Venezuelan government fears Washington could go much further than targeting just boats. The U.S. naval deployment is happening off the coast of Venezuela, just beyond the country's territorial waters, and that has the government on edge. It believes this is not about the cartels, but about regime change in Caracas. U.S. officials have ramped up their rhetoric against the Venezuelan government lately. Washington claims President Maduro is the leader not of a country, but of a drug cartel. It's doubled the reward for information leading to his arrest. Here is U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The Maduro regime is not a government. It's not a legitimate government. We've never recognized them as such. They are a criminal enterprise that basically has taken control of national territory of a country.
The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. Maduro is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this drug cartel. He has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into our country, and it is the utmost responsibility of this president and this administration to prevent the illicit flow of drugs into our country and to protect citizens from those deadly poisons.
Well, not long after those comments were made, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro called on Venezuelans to join the military. People have responded to the call and signed up to serve in the national militia. Many of those turning out are government supporters and public workers. Maduro said that he will deploy 4.5 million militia members throughout the country to guard against any foreign intervention. Maduro says Venezuela is facing the greatest threat seen in South America in a century.
8 Navy ships with 1,200 missiles and a nuclear submarine are targeting Venezuela. This is an extravagant, unjustifiable, immoral, and absolutely criminal threat. Absolutely criminal. They have wanted to escalate what they call maximum pressure, which in this case is military. In response to this maximum military pressure, we have declared maximum preparedness for the defense of Venezuela.
Our coverage continues now with Ryan Berg. He's director of the Americas Program and the head of the Future of Venezuela initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Ryan, it's good to have you with us. We're still getting details about this lethal strike against a drug vessel in Venezuela. Let me ask you, are we witnessing the first shots in Trump's war on drug cartels or the first moves towards regime change in Caracas?
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Brent. I think that this is definitely more about drug cartels than it is about regime change in Caracas. I think there are 2 reasons for why we can say that, Brent. First is the administration's rhetoric, which I think we do need to parse as analysts and see that they've said very clearly that this deployment is about interdictions in the Southern Caribbean. It's important to note that these types of interdictions happen all the time. It's just that there's a much different forced posture making these interdictions this time, as opposed to U.S. Coast Guard cutters and literal ships. It's actually a very, very large naval presence. We know well the Trump administration's aversion to so-called regime change wars. And the second is the actual force itself, Brent. Although it is very significant, Maduro has mentioned this, it is the most significant deployment since the 1989 Operation Just Cause, which of course overthrew the regime of Manuel Noriega in Panama. 4,500 Marines is a far cry from the almost 30,000 troops that were used in that operation. And it's important to note that Venezuela is much more complex than Panama as a country. So I think this is more about drug interdiction and showing incredible force against drug cartels than it is about removing Maduro from power per se.
There are, though, lots of leaders around the world whose legitimacy could be questioned. Why do you think President Trump is so fixated on Nicolas Maduro?
That's a good question, Brent. I think he sees this in many ways as unfinished business from his first administration, where the administration had a posture of maximum pressure campaign against Maduro, the recognition of an interim president, Juan Guaido, and still the United States was not able to effect a democratic transition in Venezuela. The second is the nature of Maduro's regime. CSIS is a think tank. My own center, where I work and head our Venezuela analysis, was one of the first think tanks in Washington to understand and to really call out Maduro's regime for its true nature, which is to say, this regime is heavily penetrated by criminal organizations and it's involved in illicit activity that does reach U.S. shores. And so I think there are some legitimate security concerns here coming from the Maduro regime. So a lot of, I think, the Trump administration's posture has to do with that as well.
Does it surprise you that the White House is demanding action on the drug cartels and not calling for democracy in Venezuela?
Well, I think on various occasions the administration has called for change in Venezuela, but it also has, in some ways, been a bit of a confusing policy in that they have dealt with the Maduro regime, even though we don't legally recognize it, in order to repatriate Venezuelans and to control migration. This has always been the difficulty of Venezuela policy is Maduro is not legitimate. We know that he stole the election July 28th of last year, and yet the administration to some extent still has to deal with him when it comes to efforts against migration, efforts to repatriate Venezuelans, and so on. So this has always been a difficult balance for any administration, Brent, is getting the point across about the need for democracy in Venezuela while also having to deal with those who are in power at the moment, clinging to it and not letting go.
Yesterday, during a press conference, Maduro paused to show off his new phone, which he said was a present from Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He said they spoke together on his new gadget, which he's holding there. Do you think Maduro is hoping for some help from Beijing?
Brent, I think Maduro is always looking for help from his authoritarian allies. I think it's important to note, however, that China specifically has shown exasperation with Maduro in the past. In the past few visits that he's made to Beijing, asking for money, asking for support, he's come back empty-handed. In fact, his last visit to Beijing came back with nothing more than a new way of describing the relationship with Beijing. They've gone from a comprehensive strategic partnership to an all-weather partnership. The last time the Chinese have actually given money to Maduro is at least 5 years ago, if not longer. The Chinese have learned the hard way that the Venezuelans don't often pay back when they give support to this regime, and a lot of the money tends to get siphoned off through corruption. Right now, China seems to me, Brent, incredibly focused on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the military parade, which will happen tomorrow in Beijing, and there's not much bandwidth, frankly, for Maduro at this point in time.
So let me ask you before we run out of time, if what we are seeing now is an attempt to get governments in Latin America to take stronger action against drug traffickers, what kind of measures will satisfy the United States?
It's a great question, Brent. And right now, the Secretary of State is in Mexico, hopefully signing a security agreement to that exact effect. We've seen additional support from Guyana, from Trinidad and Tobago, and from others for marking some of these organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. But I think the administration would like to see more interdiction efforts by foreign militaries or foreign police forces in order to burden share a bit in the hemisphere on some of these efforts that we're making to reduce drug supply and drug flow. That would be my guess.
And you'll be seeing that.
Ryan Berg from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Ryan, good to have you on the program. We appreciate your insights tonight. Thank you.